been waiting for. You have laid the foundation. You know how to start a podcast, what platforms to use, how to get show art, what equipment you need. And now we are going to dive into booking guests. We're going to cover preparing questions, what to do during the interview, how to follow up with your guests and properly thank them post-interview, where to find potential guests, and most importantly, how to contact them. Now, you have done all your homework. You know exactly what your platform is. You know exactly the message you want to share with your audience. Now, we want to find guests that resonate with our listeners. Now, if you decide to do a solo podcast where you never have guests, you might want to skip this part. But if you want to even bring in the occasional guest, then you want to pay attention and use all the resources provided in this module. When it comes to interviewing guests, you want to make sure that you actually know a lot about the person you're going to have on your show. You want to dive in deep. Check out their websites. That means reading the About section, finding out what's important to them right now. Are they working on any projects that resonate with your audience and them? Are they promoting something specifically during the time that they want the show to air? It's very important, especially when you're working with guests with large followings. Guests who have huge followings typically are a little bit more busy. So we want to make sure that we are appealing to them and that this interview is mutually beneficial. A great way to find potential guests is social media. Most guests have a social media page to highlight their brand and their platform. Some platforms and brands even have hashtags that are specific to their brand. The discovery page of Instagram can be a lifesaver. You can narrow topics down by hashtag or even what's trending. Here's an example of someone I admired and thought would be a great guest on our show. Nicole Walters. Let's check out her profile. Now, if you look here, you'll see that Nicole has a link in her bio. Typically, links in bios lead to any current projects that a person is working on. They want to drive traffic to get the knowledge out. You'll also find that she has a way to contact her, her email. My rule of thumb is if someone has an email address in their bio, that's how they prefer to be contacted. I've often DM'd folks as well. Because I follow Nicole Walters, I know that her personal brand hashtag is Rich Friends. Now, hashtags are great. You can search them and get a great idea on what people are looking for and who they're following. Another great way to find potential guests is to reach out to publishers. They often have authors who are releasing new books and are looking for platforms to have them featured on. Reaching out to publishers and letting them know about your podcast is a great way to keep your brand on the forefront. I've made some great relationships over the years with publishers and editors, and they constantly send guests my way upon their new releases. Now, make no mistake, you do not have to always actually have a personal relationship with someone to have them on your show. Be prepared for cold emails. I want you to think about what you would respond to. So you want to take a moment, go to your favorite social media platform, and find a way to connect with those people who you love to have on your show. Take your time, and if you're copy and pasting, be sure to dot your I's and cross your T's. The last thing you want to do is send a potential guest an email with the wrong name. When it comes to booking for guests, I send an initial email to the guest letting them know how in love I am with their brand and how I feel that they're a perfect match for the Brunch and Slay podcast. I then provide links to the show so that they can listen. I provide a website link so that they can explore and see what our platform is about and make sure that it aligns with their brand and their mission. I also include a link to my recording schedule so that they can choose a date and time that works best for them without a lot of back and forth. As a businesswoman, I know that time is precious, and the more information you provide initially, the more chances you have of having a successful guest booked. You also want to be clear and provide your guests with information as to what to expect during and after your interview. This is what I talked about in the previous video when it comes to reminding them about actually recording from a computer or wearing headphones. Let them know to be in a quieter environment and tell them any information they need to know about the particular platform you'll be recording on. If they need to download the Zoom app, you should let them know that prior to the interview. The last thing you want to do is have something scheduled and it's prolonged because of software issues or lack of preparation. Now, the platform I use for booking is Calendly. I do pay a small monthly fee to use this platform, but I did not use it initially. In the beginning, I strictly used Google Chrome. Google has a suite of services that are free of charge that come with any Gmail account that make it super easy to book and record. Now, Calendly is great for me because it integrates with Google. Once I share my recording schedule with a potential guest, it automatically updates to my Google Calendar and blocks off the time. There's no back and forth, and once it's set, we are good to go. So you want to prepare bullet points of things that you could potentially talk about. I also ask the guests, do they have anything they'd like me to cover? Initially, during our first email, and right before we record, I ask again, just in case. I often have guests who book recordings months out, so things have changed, launches have taken place, and they may have pivoted in their marketing plan. The best way to let your guests know that you are serious about making sure that this experience is mutually beneficial for them is to include them in the process and in the interview as much as possible. When considering questions for your guests, think about their projects, look at their platform, and ask yourself, what about their brand does your audience want to know more about? Is there a particular movie that will be released later this year? Have they worked with a celebrity that everyone dreams of working with? Are they a new mom and you're a mom blogger and you want to share their experience in their birth story? You really want to consider what resonates and dive deep. One of the things that folks love to hear about on the Brunch and Slay podcast is the question that I ask every guest. If you could brunch with anyone in the world, dead or alive, this Saturday, who would it be? I can't tell you how many times I've heard Oprah, but I've also had some great and interesting folks that I never would have dreamed of hearing about. I often dive deeper and ask them why they want to have brunch with that person, which typically leads us to more conversation and allows my audience to get to know them even more. I find that asking questions like this consistently always provide my guests a way of knowing where we are in the interview and provide some commonality between the listener and the guest. Another step to include in your guest booking process is to send out reminders. Don't be a person who asks someone to be on your show and never follows up with them. Once I've sent a reminder and a person has booked and solidified their interview date with me, I send several reminders. I tell them, yes, you're confirmed. I'm excited to meet with you. And as I said before, a ton of my guests book weeks, even months out in advance. So it'd be safe to say that the Brunch and Slay podcast is not at the forefront of their mind. The day before the show, I always send out a reminder with links to the recording. It's really hard when you're on the road and you're a busy person to always go back and find those old emails. So I try to make it as easy and as seamless as possible. Now, prior to recording, I want you to show up early. No matter what platform you're using, things happen. There are times when your internet might be running slow and you might not be able to record. You need to work out those kinks before you have your dream guest waiting and have to reschedule. In the beginning, when that would happen to me, I would be humiliated. And it's so difficult to ask someone to reschedule after they've been waiting 2 or 3 months just to get on your books. So take your time, show up early, and provide your guests with all the information they need to know about the platform you will use to record your show. You also want to set time expectations. My interviews typically take about 30 minutes, but I often block off 45 minutes with the guests because I can get chatty and we just might be in a groove. I set their expectations at the beginning before we even press record. And I also like to leave a little time to build a rapport with the guests. As I said before, not all folks who appear on the Brunch and Slay podcast are professional speakers or folks who are comfortable talking in front of a microphone. I use this time to help them get to know me a little bit and my personality and let them know the value and what I want to achieve in the interview. Now, here's a tip I wish I had gotten before I started podcasting. No matter what you do, be natural. Conversational podcasts thrive. People often want to feel like they are a part of a conversation or as if they're listening in on a conversation. So be sure to take a moment, set your intentions before you press record, and let the conversation flow. Your audience will appreciate it and the streams will prove that my theory is correct. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to do when interviewing a guest. Obviously, you need to research them. When you're researching them, find commonalities. Did you attend the same university? Are you both die-hard Kim Kardashian fans? Whatever that common thread is, try to pepper that in your conversation. People love to talk about themselves. That's just human nature. But when we find commonality, we often get people to let down their guards and forget that you're recording, and you actually get something that people want to tune into. Now, post-interview, you want to be sure to thank your guests and set expectations as to when the show will air and give them all the information they need. Now, if you're going to need information from them post-show, be sure that you let them know that and give them a heads up that more emails will come their way requesting more information. For example, I rely on our guests to provide imagery for our promotions, so I always follow up with a quick thank you after an interview, and I ask the guests to please provide me with a professional quality photo so that our marketing team can put some collateral together to promote the episode. I also share the collateral with the guests prior to the air date in hopes that they were shared on their platform. Again, podcasting can be great, especially when it's mutually beneficial for both parties. The good news is most people who have been on podcasts understand that, and they have no problem promoting your show. A great way for a new podcaster to gain more interviews is to ask potential guests if they have other friends or people in the industry that they'd like to recommend to be guests on your show. It's great for honing in on your interview skills, and most people who are looking for publicity understand that most small businesses and entrepreneurs are looking for platforms to be featured on. So they often have no problem making introductions and helping you out on your journey. Now that you've recorded your show, it's time to edit. You want to make sure that you remove any distracting noises, background noises like coughs, pets. In my case, I've definitely had a time or two where my dog has gone crazy while I'm recording. You often have school buses going by, so you want to make sure that you take a moment, you listen to the show, and you really get the edits out. If you aren't editing your show yourself, take a moment and listen and actually timestamp and write down, be specific as to what edits needs to be taken out. You can't rely on a third party to know how you want your show to be presented. So I suggest you do it immediately following the interview because life happens. The last thing you want to be stuck with is the night before a show is set to air, editing and freaking out because you can't get a dog bark out of an episode. Now that you've edited that show, it's time to take care of those show notes. Go back and review everything we talked about show notes, and make sure you include the things that you feel your audience will gravitate to. Focus on that SEO. Focus on those keywords and make sure you summarize the show in a way that is appealing to your avatar and to yourself. A great way to attract new listeners is to provide sound bites and quotes. I often listen to shows and look for keywords that my guests have said that I feel are intriguing and make people want to know more. Pass those notes on to your editor and your graphic designer so that they can use those sound bites to create art that helps you advertise for your show in an organic way. In reviewing the episode, I want you to make sure that you include any links, books, content, or platforms that you discussed during the interview and include it in your show notes. You want to do that because you want to make it easy for the folks who support you and who are listening. I hope that your show will include lots of tidbits and information. So you want to make sure that it's easily accessible. Adding this to your show notes will make you stand out and keep listeners coming back for more. You can share this information on your website. You can add this to iTunes as you upload your episodes. There are a ton of ways for you to do it, but most importantly, make sure you do it. And never say that you're going to include something in the show notes and not do it. So be sure you listen closely and listen to your episode all the way through. I know after spending hours interviewing people, the last thing you want to do is go back and listen to yourself. But taking shortcuts is not something you want to do when you're on your way to building a bingeable podcast. Let's talk intro music. There are a ton of platforms out there for you to use for music. Be sure that you own the rights or that you're using a platform that gives you free music and the rights to use it. It is illegal to use copywritten music in any capacity. That's why you tend to see people post on Facebook and say, I don't own the rights to this music. Respect your guests, respect everything you work for, and use a platform that provides free music with licensing. Whew! Now, we have covered a lot. I have been tongue-tied. It's so much information, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to have the show of your dreams. So take a moment, let this digest, and I'll see you in the next module.